Hello and welcome to the weekly vmcampos Comic Book Club. I'm your host, vmcampos. This is the series where I count down the top 10 first issues releasing this week on New Comic Book Day. And with over 30 years of comic book reading and collecting experience, I think I'm pretty well qualified to talk about comics. Today's episode is for Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. Let's get started. Number 10, I picked X-Men Legends number 1 over at Marvel Comics. This is written by Fabian Nicieza and art by Brett Booth. The blurb is all new tales starring your favorite X-Men spanning classic eras. So basically we have new stories here that they're in continuity and they're about classic eras that we all loved. The first tale is about the Summers brothers, which of course is Cyclops and Havoc. The comic kicks off as the Shi'ar return to Earth in search of the Forsaken One. So it'll be interesting to see how we take writers in the 21st century but go back to revisit classic stories from the 80s and the 90s and whatever decades that they choose to pick. As of this moment, I don't quite know if this is going to be a long-term series or a maxi-series or something, because the blurb says, come back each month as we dive deeper to expand the X-Men mythos. If you're a real hardcore X-Men fan, this should be definitely one of your top picks because of all the nostalgia. At number 10, I picked Savage number 1 from Valiant Entertainment. This is written by Max Bemis and art by Nathan Stockman. We've got a bunch of variant covers to enjoy in a variety of art styles. The blurb states, from the mad minds of international superstar Max Bemis and powerhouse artist Nathan Stockman comes the craziest action book of 2021. Now when I saw this comic, it reminded me of the other Savage comic that came out a few years ago. That one was also from Valiant. And I remember it being an extremely hot series, 4 issues long back in 2016. 4 issues long with a bunch of variant covers that people were salivating over. I got only the regular cover in my collection. This seems to be a sequel, because the blurb also goes on to say, teenage heartthrob, feral social icon, dinosaur hunter, born and raised on an uncharted island full of prehistoric dangers, Kevin Savage has a taste of home when a mutant dino threat invades England. So yeah, that sounds like it's the continuation. The art style is very different and the concept is different in that the character was marooned on a desert island. He had to survive in a very savage environment. So I guess now they're taking him back to the big city. So let's see what happens 4 years later. Number 8 is ARIA Heavenly Creatures one-shot from Image Comics. Is it ARIA? ARIA? Anyway, the writer is Brian Holgan, as well as Brian Haberling, so the Bryans wrote this. And the artist is Jay Anacleto, along with Brian Haberling. The blurb, Lady Kildare, expatriate Princess of Fairy, is living a life of aristocratic decadence among Victorian London's social elite. She goes slumming it to some illicit stuff in the underground and finds a sideshow boasting of creation's most wondrous and perverse curiosities, in which she finds there is a real-life angel in captivity. So that premise sounds really interesting. Taking the real-life aspects plus the fanciful fantasy aspects of it all, you can often end up with an interesting plot that mixes this sort of magical realism of it all. A variety of variant covers to enjoy and collect. I'm partial to cover D by Drew. And speaking of covers, moving over to number 7, Hollow Heart number 1, the Paul Tucker cover. This is from Vault Comics. The thing that really just captured my attention was this cover. It's just beautiful, weird, epic, scary. It reminds me of the Scooby-Doo skeleton villain that would come out during the opening credits of the old Scooby-Doo show. There's a bunch of other variant covers that are in the style of a Marvel comic, one a little bit more straightforward. There's a David Mack cover, so there's a bunch of covers. Okay, besides the cover, what's this book about? Written by Paul Allor. E.L. used to be human. Now he's a jumble of organs in a biosuit. E.L. is also in tremendous pain and has been for a very long time. Hope arrives in the form of Mateo, a mechanic brought in to work on EL's suit. So this is a queer monster love story about the choices we make. It's really cool to venture off into the indie publishers like Vault to get a variety of interesting stories. At number 6, Young Hellboy, The Hidden Land, one of 4. So happy birthday Dark Horse Comics, one of the first indie publishers of the 80s. They're celebrating 35 years. So here we have Mike Mignola's classic character, Hellboy, in a new adventure, but this is Young Hellboy. This is written by Mignola and Tom Snygoski, who is also working on the Vampirella comic. Interior art by Craig Russo, and a couple of variant covers. One by Matt Smith and one by Mike Mignola. The synopsis: stranded on a strange island after a mishap on their way to a South American dig site, Hellboy and Professor Brutenholm are confronted by all manner of monsters. So this is a childhood tale of young Hellboy. Number 5, from Scout Comics, I picked Black Friday number 1 of 3, written by John Clark, art by Travis Williamson. This is another one of these covers that really stands out. We have this grotesque skeleton, or zombie, or whatever, coming at you in a Walmart-esque location. Very artistically and grotesquely drawn. This is from Scout Comics, but it's their Black Caravan imprint. The synopsis: Black Friday is the biggest shopping day of the year. An unlucky cleanup crew deals with the aftermath of the latest Black Friday frenzy, and they discover that years of pent-up negative energy has released something very evil and dark into their superstore. But wait a minute, this is just the way corporate wanted it! This sounds pretty fun, mixing horror with Black Friday, a Walmart stand-in. Seems like a fun combination of concepts. Number 4, Black Cotton number 1 of 6, also from Scout Comics. Written by Patrick Foreman and Brian Hawkins, art by Marco Perugini. This plot sounds pretty interesting. Set in an alternate reality where the social order of white and black is reversed, an elitist family, the Cottons, are rocked by a tragic shooting that begins to unravel long-standing family secrets that could not only destroy the family, but also divide the fragile social climate of the world. So this sounds like a more serious comic book, tackling real-life issues of prejudice and injustice, but flipped on its head, opposite of what we unfortunately know nowadays. So I like that comics can tackle this variety of topics, can make you think, and maybe make you feel something. Number 3, we have DC Comics Truth and Justice number 1, written by Jeffrey Thorne, and art by Chris Cross and Jordi Tarragona. This is a new anthology series. Vixen takes center stage here. Vixen teams up with Dr. Mist and Impala of the Global Guardians to face down an ancient deity that's taken over the body of a scientist investigating powerful magical artifacts. I'm not the most entrenched fan of the Vixen character at DC Comics, so this is my pick to get more knowledge about the character, to see her adventures, what she's all about. And so I applaud DC for making this anthology series to easily get your feet wet with a variety of characters. Number 2, at Aftershock Comics, I picked Shadow Doctor number 1. This is written by Peter Calloway and art by Georges Janty. This is pretty fascinating because it's based on the author's grandfather, Nathaniel Calloway. He was a black man who graduated from medical school in the 1930s. And America being what it was at that time, he was not able to get work anywhere in the Chicago hospitals because he was black. He couldn't start his own business either because he was black. So he turned to the only source of money he had at the time, the Prohibition-era Chicago Mafia run by none other than Al Capone. Is one of my top picks because it can take history and bring it to modern times in the comic book medium, which is one of the best storytelling formats out there. And the number 1 comic for this week is Immortal Hulk Flatline number 1 from Marvel Comics. One creator, one Hulk, one superstar story. So we have written by Declan Shalvey, and we have art by Declan Shalvey. You don't see that as much as you used to, where you have a writer-artist all in one. So there's sort of a cool purity to it all. The synopsis: Declan Shalvey writes and draws an Immortal Hulk tale that gets to the heart of Gamma. Every morning, Bruce Banner wakes up in a new place. The Hulk is trying to tell him something, but Bruce has had enough of his green-veined alters. When a new Gamma-powered villain shows up in a small New Mexico town, Bruce is forced to confront the source of his anger, and it's not what you expect. Immortal Hulk has been one of Marvel's top-selling titles at this point, so here we have an issue number 1 to see what all the hoopla is about. And that's my top 10 countdown for Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. What do you think? Did I get it right? What did I miss? Tell me all about it below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and maybe consider pledging at my Patreon. You'll get tier rewards and exclusives over at patreon.com/vmcampos. Plus, it shows you really appreciate my efforts. You can start pledging at $1 a month, and I'd really appreciate it. If you can't pledge at the moment, no worries. Simply follow for free to be alerted to everything that I do regarding comic books, reviews, previews, monthly hauls, shorts, and more. This has been the weekly VM Campos Comic Book Club, and I'll see you next week.